All right. Thank you everyone for being here. In the interest of time, it is noon now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Leah Raffa. I work for the Denver Public Schools Substance Use Prevention Program. We host these webinars on the first Wednesday of every month. And this month, I'm so excited for our guest to speak about the legal and social issues that youth are facing right now. So first of all, we have with us Senior Deputy District Attorney Juan Siva. Juan is a Senior Deputy District Attorney, man, that's a title, in the juvenile unit of the Denver District Attorney's Office. Juan is fully bilingual and has served 5.5 years in the juvenile unit. And this is out of the 14.5 years that he's been working for the Denver DA's office. Prior to his service in the Denver DA's office, Juan worked for a short time as a county court district attorney with the 5th Judicial District. And prior to that, Juan worked for the juvenile unit of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. For several years, Juan has also worked for the UVISA Federal Reviewer for the Denver DA's office. And in that capacity, Juan has worked with legislators, CDAC, and has even testified at the Capitol several times. Juan is heavily involved with and in issues involving mental health and how Colorado residents are faced with these issues. Additionally, we have the Director of Community Engagement for the Denver DA's office, Mauro Kasparian. I said it right the first time. Mauro is responsible for collaborating, partnering, and engaging with the Denver community and agencies with the work of the DA's office. Mauro developed an education initiative to provide Denver middle and high school students with information to enhance their understanding of our criminal justice system. This program aims to deter future criminal behaviors and provide victim resources. She also provides community presentations, including Stand Up Against Fraud, which provide audiences with ways to keep themselves from being victims of scams and identity theft. So thank you both for being here. Thank you everyone for attending. We will take questions at the end. So any questions you have moving forward, there's a little Q&A button down at the bottom. Go ahead and enter the questions and we will take those all in the last 15 minutes or so. So with that said, I will turn it over to you, Juan and Mauro.
Thank you, Ms. Leah. So first of all, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us on this snowy afternoon, especially since I know school is out. You're all probably very much like I am with a small child at home. So I appreciate you all attending and being part of this. We're about to become very quick friends going over this information. In normal circumstances or circles, talking about this type of subject that we're going to be talking about oftentimes can be a little bit nerve-wracking or a little bit uncomfortable, but like I said, we're going to be friends very quickly. Because this is what I do for a living. And so I want to make sure that you all have as much information as possible so that you and your kids can be making the best choices possible for themselves now and moving forward in life. As you heard, and I know the way you all do this, I'm going to kind of go through this information. If there's anything that's very pressing, please put those questions into the type box. And if I need to be stopped, they'll stop me. Otherwise, I'll be happy to spend whatever time is allowed to answer any questions at the end. So with that in mind, I will go ahead and share my screen and just let me know, make sure everyone can see it. Can you all see my screen? Yes, perfect.
Looks great, thanks.
All right, of course. All right, so going on here. So first of all, what we should all be very clear about is we're gonna be talking about, as I said, some very sensitive or delicate subjects, but I have found in doing this job for as long as I have, it's better to be very clear and direct about what we're talking about. The law oftentimes and most times does not have room or time to really get sensitive about subjects simply because of the gravity of a lot of the issues that we face. So as you're aware of why you're here today, coming from the district attorney's office, we'll be able to provide you some insight and some information as to the landmines and pitfalls that face kids nowadays that weren't present or available when I was their age, or let alone a lot of other of you that might be closer to my age. Things are very different. Changes in technology, changes in advancements of technology have really changed the landscape in which kids nowadays and even adults deal And that's something that can obviously lead to a lot of concern, not only for emotional and mental health, but also for legal ramifications that kids and parents may not be aware are possible pitfalls for them. So we are going to be talking about from our office regarding consent, sex assault, a lot of it, how it deals with what we call sexting, and how those intersect a lot with bullying. There are different ways in why people sext or take part in that type of avenue. It doesn't always have to do with sexual gratification. At times, as you see on the screen, sometimes it does have to do with cyberbullying, which has become rampant in today's society, in today's day and age, simply because of how important and what a significant role technology plays in our day-to-day life, let alone those who only know this, right? I'm old enough to remember the days when we didn't have a quick internet connection. You hear that dinging with AOL and you got mail and all that stuff. So that shows you how old I am. And I think that's super important, especially for parents who are probably closer to my age, maybe a little bit younger, and maybe don't have as much familiarity with all the different avenues that technology now plays in our lives and how kids can get in trouble very quickly. So always trying to look out for the parents and making sure that we give you all the information possible. So as you can see, the definition for sexting with a little short example, more or less in the layman's terms, is sending nude images, videos via cell phone, through internet messaging, or by similar means, and those being apps, right? Apps on our phones, apps on our computers. And why is that so important? Because you can have laws in place, you can have the best intentions of what those laws are supposed to do and what they're supposed to protect. But obviously, when things are then considered with the almighty dollar and you have companies and that are dealing with applications, they oftentimes target specific ideas that the laws are aimed to prevent or protect, and they find ways to be lucrative in order to circumvent those ways. So those apps, in my humble experience of doing this job for almost 16 years, actually here in other locations, that is what I often find is the need for laws that need to change in order to plug up in those holes and those issues that are prevalent, because companies and individuals are always finding ways to get around them. And that part right there in that little chat box that Ms. Morrow was able to put in there for you, where it says, "I swear I won't show anyone." As a DA, we might be some of the more jaded individuals in society simply because of everything we deal with and what we see people are capable of. But what I learned, and I will teach my 4-year-old, is you don't trust anybody. Don't trust anybody, because at the end of the day, there are very few people you can trust, as we probably have all learned who are adults, and we'll go into that more. So reasons to text, and as I said, it's kind of hard maybe for individuals who are a little bit older, even someone my age, that wasn't around when we were kids, right? That wasn't even an option or even a thought, because the technology wasn't there. But as you can imagine, a lot of times now why individuals sext can go everything from, as you see on the screen, curiosity, never tried it, don't know what's involved. Let's see what this is about, try it out, like it or don't like it, but they give it a whirl, right? One time may be enough to cause certain ramifications to go into play, whether they be legal as an individual who has committed a crime, or as a victim. And in all sincerity, I'm here, and I think it's a great thing that the school district does for this type of situation, because at the end of the day, hopefully with more information, with really understanding the pitfalls that can present themselves on either side as a perpetrator or as a victim, I think the hopes for all of us professionals, is to try to prevent this from happening, right? I don't want juveniles in the system because they didn't know what they were doing was a crime, or they didn't realize the ramifications of their actions. But almost more importantly, I don't want victims, right? Going to sleep at night, waking up in the morning, sometimes all I'm thinking about are my cases or victims. And at the end of the day, even if I prosecute a case, it doesn't necessarily mean that pain, that scarring, that mental health issue is going to go away for the victim or even the suspect who's charged, because a lot of times the juveniles are internalizing their actions, and then they carry that with them. We want to try to prevent all that from actually happening. Another reason you see on here for why a lot of people sex, peer from peers, friends, and partners, that pressure, right? That's always been around. It's just now it's more prevalent and over many more mediums than were around when I was in the same age. Another reason, lower risk of sexual behavior in terms of infections, pregnancy. I mean, right? You start balancing the issues. You're like, well, I either didn't get someone pregnant, or, my daughter's not pregnant. So that's that's an amazing thing, but that easily can be bounced off negatively with up. Now this picture's out there and now it's being shared, and now there's going to cause some extreme emotional mental health strife that could easily change a person's trajectory in life, whether it be emotionally based, goal orientation, because of all these additional items that they're having to deal with. And because, as we all know, when something gets on the internet, it never really goes away anymore. It's always out there someplace, even if we try to scrub some of that information from the World Wide Web. Another reason, boost the confidence. I think everyone likes being given compliments. So, some people need that additional boost, whether, they feel low self-esteem or they just like the attention. There's a reason behind there. One of the big things that we see in our line of work when it comes to sexting is the initial interaction, right, between the two individuals. That might have started pure, but it can quickly spiral out of control and completely change its trajectory when you start introducing elements of revenge or bullying, because as we all know, that is extremely prevalent and has been for quite some time and is only getting worse. Also flirting, obviously, some people are much bigger into picture versus words. And so, sometimes people try to kind of scratch that itch, and with the flirting aspect of like, well, if I send a picture, that's going to do a lot more than me having this long time of conversation. Connection to partner, as we've discussed. I mean, that level of not necessarily intimacy in the sense of actual physical connection, but just feeling like you're being understood, you're being seen, you're being appreciated by somebody else that you're interested in. As we all know, we've all been at that age, can go a long way, except now the avenues by which things can get spiral out of control have grown by so much that now that's why we're having presentations like this. Impulsive behavior, as we all know, the brain does not fully stop or doesn't fully form until much later in life, usually early 20s, obviously give or take on the individual. Because of that, we've all been there, right? We're all kids, we're all teenagers once upon a time, and teenagers have a lot of hormones, going through a lot of changes. Obviously haven't learned the hard way that a lot of lessons that us as adults have learned and have taken the time to learn. And it's one of those issues of complete impulse control, as what we find is one of the greatest obstacles, and it's usually one of the greater prevalent elements when juveniles are committing crimes, whether they know it or not. And one of the last ones we have on here is we believe erroneously that it's going to remain private, because as I said, and we'll get into this a little bit more, even if it's kept private, it's not really private. And we'll go into a little bit later as to why that is. So possible negative outcomes of sexting. So as I have the first one here, our office reviews cases and makes charging decisions on all complaints that come to our office. So right off the bat, I think at least for the most part, most individuals who are law-abiding citizens, it doesn't really bother them one way or another, because they just go about their business doing, their own life and their own business. But I could say, even before I became a DA, nobody wants a DA looking into their personal business. You don't want police involved in your ongoing activities. I bring that up because obviously when we make decisions about charging, that is exactly what the DA who's handling those decisions is making, right? They're making a determination is, do we have sufficient evidence? Can we prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime has been committed, and we have the evidence to actually present, if need be, at trial or to a judge, as to the strength of our case. And we'll go this into a little bit more, because trust me when I say we're reviewing information documents for a charging decision, usually we have the pictures, usually we have the video, usually we have that evidence that private individuals would not want someone they don't know or not in that type of relationship seeing, having that information. Another possible negative outcome, and in all sincerity, is a grave one, is the social ramifications, right? Charges and cases, that's one thing. And, that's stuff that if you do everything you're supposed to, you can work through it, you can get by it. The social ramifications, sometimes that's going to almost be a bigger hit. And I'll put social ramifications with not only among friends, not only among your community, right? Whether it be school, friends, teachers, family, but also the social ramifications, I'll call it, of your personal mental health, your emotional stability. Because obviously, as we know, mental health, your emotions can have a grave impact on how you're seen by the public, your ability to interact, and how you feel and see yourself. And that can just have a huge rolling snowball effect where it starts very small, and then before you know it, it gets out of control like a wildfire, and then no one can control it, and it's just gone way beyond to actually have an outstanding and long-term ramifications on what you do with your life. Another possible negative impact or outcome could be court involvement. As an adult, and you could look to your parents about this. When you become an adult, you don't think other than maybe your boss or something like that. You're an adult. People aren't really telling you what to do, or you don't have to do things. Even as a child, there might be a lot of kids who don't like being told certain things. Well, it's one thing to have an option to, maybe ignore a parent when they're telling you something. It's a whole nother ball game when the courts are involved, because guess what? Now you're under a court order. And, we're not talking about, you're being sent to your room, or you got extra chores, or, your parents are just unhappy with you, but you know that they love you. So, they're going to get over it eventually. Court gets involved. Now that's completely out of your hands as a child or as a juvenile. It's out of the hands of your parents, who you look to for support and comforts and to defend you. Now it becomes the issue of people like myself, people like the judge, and other professionals like a guardian ad litem who get involved, and now they get a say in your life, right? Nobody wants that. That's why if we can prevent these kids going into the system, if we can prevent kids being victims, then they don't have to be involved in that, right? You don't have to go to therapy. You don't have to go through all these additional obstacles that the court is putting before you, because now they have actual jurisdiction over you as the juvenile, or over the life of your child, because they're now involved in the court system. It can also have negative outcomes of being put on diversion, so similar to court involvement. It could be, obviously, the probation department gets involved, and they're the ones who are overseeing, right? You might have a late bedtime from your parents, but you don't want probation or diversion or the courts getting involved and saying, so listen, now you're not bedtime, but you got to be home by 5, or you need to be home by 6. And if you want to leave, you're going to have to get permission, not only from your parents, but now you're going to have to get permission from the probation officer. Nobody wants that many hands, that many cooks in the kitchen, right? We got to trust our parents to do what they're supposed to and what's in the best interest of their kids. No parent wants to have a third party come in and start helping them or telling them how to parent. So anything that can be done to, alleviate parents of that concern and issue, it goes a long way. And then obviously sex offender registration at the bottom of a possible outcome. That's bad, right? If you know anything about sex offender registration, it can impact a lot of things. It can impact, for the kids, you're looking for scholarships. You turn 18 and you're ready to start looking for a place to live outside of the house. Guess what? When you're having to register as a sex offender, those kind of things are what's reported to the state. Those things can have grave impact on where you live, finances for school. Do you get a job? Your parents and the teachers can tell you, most applications have something on there about, have you ever been convicted or adjudicated of a crime? If so, when? What type of crime was it? You can imagine sex crimes, unless you start getting to grave details, aren't defined in the sense of when you're answering a question on an application for school or work, it doesn't say, was it indecent exposure because you were urinating outside in public and you got caught, or did you actually sexually assault someone? Sometimes you just get that classification, and then, people's minds go crazy, and, it might be something way worse in their head than what you actually did, right? So it's always something to take into account of how it's going to be perceived by people who aren't in your circle or know exactly what took place. You should know that there are different levels of the charges. Not only that, but there are different ways in which you can be charged. We'll go into this a little in more detail right now, but just to make it clear, you have posting, so you're actually disseminating the information or the photo. Possession, just being in possession of it, right? You don't even have to be doing some sort of affirmative movement or outwardly movement to post it or send it to somebody else. It's just in your possession. And then obviously exchanging that information or those photos, meaning you as the victim who send it and then it's used against you. Technically speaking, you have two different types of crimes. So we'll go into that with more specifics. So here's a little, for those of you who are like me, and I do a lot better with pictures, just so I understand things a lot more there. You can see the example that Ms. Mara was so kind to put on here. You have Ben and Elise are dating. Let me just move this little picture. Go, get out of the way. And then you said, Ben said he wouldn't screenshot, but he did. He swears not to show anyone. One of the things you should keep in mind is, as I said earlier, there are actual applications and apps that have been created for this exact situation, right? So what you should always know is, even though you're not supposed to, even though these individuals might be alerted that you're taking a screenshot, a lot of these apps still allow you to take a shot, and that's using an app. Imagine how easy it then is to just do it on your phone, right? You send a text message just straight on the phone. You don't know there's a screenshot. At least with the app, sometimes they notify the sender that a screenshot has been taken. But there are many other ways in which you would never know that the photo was maintained. And at the end of the day, like I said, human nature and, doing this job, I don't trust many people. And so the idea of trusting someone with such sensitive information, right? A nude photo of myself, even the thought of my wife having that even sets me a little flutter in my stomach, simply because you just never know where life's going to be. And I'm not psychic or a mind reader. I can't foresee the future as to where that photo may end up. How about even just something as simple as my wife loses her phone, right? You just don't know what's going to happen. So using this example, taking it a step further, you have here Elise sends Ben a naked picture of herself. And so what's to think about there is, a lot of this, what we're talking about today, is we're talking specifically about the kids, right? The juveniles. And why that's so important is there are a lot of things that can be done between consenting adults that is not a crime. That is nothing that needs to be made anybody else's problem or issue. The issue here, though, is when we have individuals who are under the age of 18, many of those same actions, many of those same innocent ideas become actual crimes. Same reason why someone who's above the age of 18 can be in possession of a handgun. Anybody who's under the age of 18 in possession of a handgun is automatically violating the law and can be charged with juvenile possession of a handgun. I give you that example because in that example that we're using right now, two juveniles, 16, 17-year-old under the age of 18, in a consensual relationship, you send that photo, you've committed a crime because it's per se, right? It's per se, meaning if you do it, it doesn't matter why. It does not matter to the court. It does not matter to the judges why it was done, right? Ben was having a bad day and Elise just wanted to bring a smile to his face. Ben was feeling lonely, so Elise wanted to make him feel comforted. Ben was threatening suicide, and the only way to get him off of the issue was to give him this distraction, right? It doesn't matter. It might matter for purposes of a sentence, but it doesn't matter for the purposes of charging, all right? And that's the main thing you got to think about, is there's a distinction between going through the system, being charged, versus, am I going to go to jail? No, most likely you're not going to go to jail in the juvenile system, but the premise of it is now you're in the system, right? Now you got to go through all these issues and obstacles and hurdles in order to get on the back end of what happened. So still using the same example, Ben then decides to send Elise's nudes to his friends to get back at her, right? So once again, maybe during that time frame, and as we all know, with all due respect, I was a kid and I was a teenager once upon a time. Life changes very quickly, right? You might have, in high school, you might have a beautiful relationship for a week or two, and you're like, wow, I'm going to marry this person, right? And I'm saying this to you with complete candor. I don't know who's watching this, so I don't know if it's more kids than adults. But I was there. It's puppy love. It's, your first real boyfriend or girlfriend. It's your first, real relationship. And you're feeling your way out through things, right? You're trying to experiment. You're figuring out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, long as you're doing, you're have a good relationship and you're talking with your parents and you know what's expected of you. I'm here to talk to you more about those additional ramifications, right? Those additional ramifications that now having someone like me involved, having the judges and courts involved, and that's what we're talking about.
I think the PowerPoint will work better if you put it on presentation mode. Do you see the little, if not, that's not a big deal. I don't want to trip you up.
No, you're good. I don't know if you can you do it on your part?
Yeah.
Perfect.
But you keep going.
Okay, perfect. So as you can see on here, a few weeks later, rumors start spreading that Elise has been flirting with someone else, and Ben and Elise break up, right? Things happen a lot as young adults, as teenagers. And even though you may be very mature for your age and you might have enough common sense to know what's right and wrong, there are a lot of people, young individuals who don't have that same common sense. And that's why I have a job, right? There's a reason why I am so busy and I have so much work all the time currently in the juvenile unit, is because there's a lot of people who don't, juveniles who don't have common sense. make bad decisions that they maybe feel bad about later. But by that time, as I said, once we deal with the internet, once we're dealing with this type of medium, there's nothing that can be taken back, and now it's too late. So taking into account, we start going through what type of crimes have been committed, right? So giving another, all right, so going back to what we were talking about. So Ben and Elise are dating. As we said, Elise sends Ben a naked picture of herself. He says he wouldn't screenshot it, but he does, right? So right off the bat, as I said earlier, you have this exchange. You have Elise sending another juvenile a picture of herself. So it's a picture of herself, but now she's committed a crime. She's committed a crime, even if he was willing to accept it, right? He wanted that photo. He asked for that photo. That individual technically has committed a crime because it is illegal for an underage individual to send a nude or a sexually related photo of themselves or somebody else who's under the age of 18 to anybody else, okay? Let alone another juvenile. So then what we have is Elise has committed this offense, and now Ben is in possession of the photo or video, right? So even if we don't go that extra step of now he's disseminating it to friends in a revenge or bullying or cyberbullying type of avenue, the fact that he's still in possession of it, that also, you can imagine what you hear on the news regarding the possession of child pornography, right? That is taken very seriously. Anybody that under age of 18, even if you're 16, even if you're 17, you are technically a juvenile under the law. And because of that, that could also fall under the idea of that you're in possession of child pornography. We're not going that far right now because this is what we're dealing with right now, sexting. But just realize that is something that could be in play depending on how it's used. So as we were talking before, so now you have Ben deciding to post, share, disseminate the photo as a retaliation, as revenge for this breakup. And remember, most of these actions are being done without a lot of common sense, without a lot of forethought of, 3-4 steps down the road of, should I really be doing this? What are the ramifications if I do this, right? Because you see in this example is there were rumors, right? Not that there would be any basis in my mind as to why or justification of why Ben should be able to disseminate photos that aren't of him. But in this example, it's a rumor. He doesn't know it's true or not. But once again, this is just to illustrate and highlight it can't be undone once it's disseminated. So now Ben posts, right, or he shares what information, this private information that was shared with them. So now you have Ben is responsible for being in possession of it, no matter what. He's now posted and is exchanging these private details, these private photos with individuals that were never meant to see this information or photos, right? So he's now shared them with these additional friends, Matt and Tyler. And so the problem becomes now they also are all in possession of this photo. So now all of a sudden, two individuals who maybe never knew they were going to be involved, right? Maybe they didn't even know it was coming. All of a sudden it just shows up on their phone. Technically speaking, right, if there aren't affirmative actions on their part, could now themselves be seeking or be facing some sort of liability through charges, depending on what their actions are regarding this information, right? Not to mention, remember, Ben is sending this to these additional friends. Did they ask for it? Is it being sent without any sort of request, information, or authority? That's important because there's also a distinction in many of the laws regarding unwanted, right? Unwanted information or the sharing of private photos and videos. So now we go to legal requirements to stay above the law, or at least so that you're not seeing me in court. So just to make it easy, to make it plain as day, if a student or an individual receives an unsolicited naked picture through social media, they really should be contemplating deleting the photo. No charges will be filed, right? You can show to your parents, you can show to the prosecutors, you can show to police. Listen, it's date stamped, right? It's date stamped. You can look at records. I received this. I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't ask for it. I didn't even know it was coming. I automatically recognized that this was wrong. I didn't want to be involved. I deleted it. Then we don't have issues, right? Because you can't control what somebody else does. Someone sends me something like that, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. I automatically would delete it because I have no interest in that. I am not involved, right? If you report it within 72 hours, no charges generally, right? Because obviously, things happen. Maybe you don't have your phone with you. Maybe you got grounded. You have your phone. Your parents have your phone. You don't know what happened. Long as you can show that you took the appropriate, reasonable, right? And this is all about being reasonable actions to show to whomever, I had no part in this. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to be involved. Then we're kosher, right? We're good. You just got to be able to show those things. So not getting involved is always the most important and best step to take, which is just don't get involved. Don't get involved. Separate yourself from the issue. Tell that person, hey, I don't want to be involved in this. Please don't be sending me things like that. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want you to get in trouble because of me, because you're sending me things. Please keep me out of it, right? So then the question becomes, well, what are the problems, or how do the problems arise? Well, keeping the photo, right? You keep the photo for whatever reason. I don't care what the reason is. You just want to have the photo for future reference. I don't know why, because then my mind as a prosecutor leads to future bullying, future retaliation, future blackmailing. That's where my mind goes as a prosecutor, right? So then the issue becomes, why would you even be in possession with it? And if you are in possession of it and we can trace it, which we can, and we'll go into that a little later, you could be charged with possession. It obviously also depends on how long it's been, what you did with that information, how good of an excuse you can provide, and realize people like myself and Ms. Morrow have been doing this job for a very long time. I may not be the smartest guy, but I have a good gut. And I've heard all the excuses under the sun. I've heard all the justifications. I've heard every reason possible. So you're going to have to get up really early in the morning to try to get one over on me. So you can imagine how great that's going to be for my 4-year-old when she gets older.
I will point out that posting, all a student has to do is just show their phone. They don't have to put it anywhere. So in a locker room, hey dudes, this is what I have. Showing the phone is posting. So that's where kids get slippery.
And and you see that last part on there about distribute, show, or repost. And Ms. Morrow is 100% correct, which is, let me say this. There's a reason sometimes we say, talking about family and blood being thicker than waters, because, for the most part, parents, siblings, family members will have your back. The issue with friends, and obviously those that maybe are just associates, not even real friends, is, can you really trust these people? Can you really be certain that when they say, I'm not going to show anybody, they're really going to do so, right? You'd be amazed how many people, and I'll use the term roll over, or give up, or tattletale on others that are supposedly their friends, are supposedly they're super tight with, simply to save their behind, right? When people are pressed with charges, with facing actual consequences, it's amazing how fast people are willing to divert that attention, divert that negativity to somebody else. So, think twice about the fact of, maybe you have that photo and you're like, I sincerely was just showing my friends. I wasn't doing it for blackmailing. I wasn't doing it as revenge. I literally was just kind of boasting, right? Look how beautiful my girlfriend is. Look how handsome my boyfriend is, what have you. But then you show somebody, that act itself is a crime, okay? Even if you didn't send it electronically or print it out or anything like that, just like Ms. Morrow stated, showing somebody can be enough to charge you. So keep that in mind, because I know sometimes we get juveniles as well as adults who think they're just, geniuses, and think they're going to somehow talk their way out of something or get around it. Like I said, we've been doing this for a very long time. This is what we do. We take trainings on this. I have plenty of cases that revolve this type of subject. It'd be very hard to show me something that I haven't already seen or heard. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's going to be very hard for you to circumvent or get around what I'm telling you. This has on here as just reminders for the parents out there. As you saw in here, just showing is can be the same as posting. So make sure your kids aren't trying to talk circles around you because maybe you're not the most up to date with all the changes in technology. Doing it old school and just showing someone a photo, it can be absolutely sufficient enough when you're dealing with people under the age of 18 for getting to a point of being charged with posting or being in possession of a private image for someone who's under the age of 18. So keep that in mind. Also, a juvenile may avoid punishment for possession if he takes steps as we just discussed. And you have on here, as most schools do, Safe to Tell, or other schools or districts have specific ability to report these things. At the end of the day, no one likes to be a snitch. No one likes to be a tattletale. But keep in mind, at the end of the day, other individuals who you think may have your back may not have your back. And they may quickly turn on you in order to make sure they don't get themselves in trouble. So it becomes like in many movies, who's going to be the first one to break when, you got two separate individuals talking to the police? Someone always breaks. So just realize if you know what's right and you know what's right and wrong, and you know or have a way to alleviate yourself of those concerns or those possible legal challenges, do what's right. And there are avenues. You don't have to be a snitch where you're walking down a DPD and driving down there and having conversation with detectives. You can take these other avenues of safe to tell, making sure you delete the pictures. There are different steps you can take just so that you're not facing possible legal prosecution. You should also see on here, social media apps are not private, even Snapchat, right? Our investigators are amazing. We have tools at our disposal called warrants, subpoena ducis tecums, meaning you think you're using this application and with all due respect, these companies, these app owners can give you all the assurances under the sun of, oh, what you're doing here is private. No one can get it. Now they may be talking about, John Smith on the street corner, maybe just some regular citizen isn't gonna be able to get it because there are certain security ramifications in place. However, I'm not just John Smith. I have the legal ramifications and legal tools behind me. And through the Denver Police Department or other law enforcement agencies, we can get these things. It may take us a little time, but we can get them. You'd be amazed. I can get everything from your GPS. I can ping your location. I can actually read your text messages. I can get your entire history on Snapchat. I can see what you're snapping. I know it deletes. I know you have only so many seconds to see it, and then it deletes itself. I can get it. Why? Because what a lot of juveniles and maybe even the parents don't realize is that even though these agencies and these apps give you these assurances of privacy, they also protect themselves from liability. Okay. What happens is if you allow your users to delete this information, or like on Snapchat where it just deletes itself, if that could happen, then that doesn't provide the company any sort of defense from any sort of accusations of liability, right? So what does that mean? How would the company then fight those issues? Well, they maintain those documents for their own protection. Doesn't mean someone's going through your text messages, for their own pleasure and fun, but they have them at their disposal so that if there was ever an accusation or an allegation of wrongdoing, whether it be civil or criminal, those companies have at their disposal your records in order to protect themselves from liability. Because at the end of the day, realize these applications, these companies are working off the almighty dollar, and anything that's going to hurt their bottom dollar, they're not interested in. So what does that mean is that they have a large cash reserve of, and when I say cash, I mean documents. They have everything. They save it all. It's all electronic, right? It's up in the cloud type of situation. Realize we can still get it as law enforcement, given we got to jump through hurdles, we got warrants issued, but I can always get that information if it gets signed off by a judge. So realize just because something gets deleted, just because something goes away right then and there on your phone, on the app, doesn't mean it's actually gone. And something that happened a year ago or 2 years ago or 6 months ago can always come back, okay? Not to mention, we even go into this, and it's not even really part of the presentation, but the issue becomes, realize that you have hackers, right? You have people who can do a lot of these things illegally, and you never know what their purpose in doing so is. Last one on here is sexting produces vulnerabilities. As you can see, once a sext is sent, you can't take it back. And we've already talked about hackers, law enforcement, and so on. This is very straightforward. Everything can start off on the right mindset, but oftentimes I would say more than 90% of the time, things go wrong very quickly, and things will digress to bullying, cyberbullying. It's one thing to be bullied by your significant other or the person you sent the photo to. It's another thing when individuals who you have no interaction with or even really know get involved, and all of a sudden you're being blackmailed, right? Now you're dealing with issues of humiliation. You're getting unwanted attention, right? Whether they're from possible suitors or people making comments that you don't want to hear, but also that could be in person, that could be electronic unwanted attention, right? Nobody wants to delete pages, social media stuff that they've taken so many years to develop, because now you're getting all this unwanted attention. And then something as a prosecutor that holds dear to my heart is the distress, right? Emotional, the mental distress that these kids are going to go through on either side because they're now involved in the situation. So defining cyberbullying for you, just so that it's clear. You get older, you might have a certain idea of what bullying means, but cyberbullying is when someone is repeatedly and intentionally harasses, mistreats, or makes fun of another person online or while using cell phones or other electronic devices. That can also be through an app. The old days of bullying someone in person, that's long gone. Now people have the audacity to do it anonymously, where they don't have to actually take responsibility for their words because they think they're protected by the anonymity of a app, or just the fact that they don't know who, you're using a burner phone or a blocked phone or something like that. Sending mean texts or items to someone, same premise. Pranking someone's cell phone, you'd be amazed how smart everyone is nowadays. Besides pranking, pretending to be somebody else, you even got people who can spoof numbers. You don't know where it's coming from. Everything to take into account, especially if you're not an expert in technology. Hacking someone's gaming or social network profile. We're going through this right now, which is you also have to be careful that who you share your information with, right? When you start accessing online, or you're accessing the internet, if it's depending on the privacy settings of that allows, if you're using kind of like, Starbucks, or you're using some sort of open general Wi-Fi signal, you could easily be giving access to someone that you don't know, access to your computer, your device that's on that internet. And that gives them a back door into your device. So keep that in mind. It may be something you're not even aware of. Being rude or mean to someone in an online game may give someone enough justification in their mind to do something like this. And that's something always you want to keep in mind, especially depending on who you're dealing with. Do you know them? Do you not know them? Do you even know their name? Do you even know how to get a hold of them? Keep in mind also, for cyberbullying, it can also entail spreading secrets or rumors about people online, right? You may not even know them. You may not even know if it's true or not, but just the fact that you're spreading those rumors, you're furthering along the issue, that by itself qualifies for cyberbullying, even if you're not the first one to spread the rumor, you're not the main person involved. Pretending to be someone else, we have a lot of those. You get someone to trust you, that they're thinking that you're a certain person, and it turns out that's not you. And then all of a sudden you're sharing private information or photos, not realizing it's not that person. So then what we go to is, so a quick example here, as we oftentimes tend to do in dealing with friends. This example is just for females, but you have juveniles having a sleepover, get together, what have you. The example is that Angie takes a nude photo, or these kids take a nude photo of themselves just for fun, right? We're all kind of getting together, divulging secrets, and so they do this. The problem, though, as you all know, sometimes you get people issue of revenge. You get kids not thinking clearly, and worse is that all these girls trust each other so much. And as I've seen in many cases, they share private information, not only photos, but hey, this is my password. Can you hop on to my Snapchat and send this out? Or hey, my phone's over there. Can you get on and send a text to my mom? Or can you text this friend or so-and-so? Now, all of a sudden, you're providing this private information, right? Passwords, social security number, it's all up there, right? Because you don't know what can happen when someone is able to access your devices and can pretend to be you. So then over here on the right side, it says appears that this individual has sent nude photos of herself to everyone at school, when that's not what happened, right? So all of a sudden that gives an extra layer of hurt, because now it comes across as though the victim did it to themselves, when it turns out that one of their supposed friends pretended to be them and sent it on their behalf. So not only are they having to deal with the fact that the photo, the video is now out there, now they're also dealing with the idea and the fact, knowing that their friend, one of their best friends, took that trust, not only crushed it, but put them in a situation to look like they're looking for praise, right? They wanted to put it out there themselves. So now you have a victim who's having to deal with all this on top of now having to break back down to reality. I didn't do it. Or yeah, sure you didn't do it. No, I really didn't, right? And having to go through that whole hurdle. That just complicates the matter so significantly. So just some details, or I guess some more definitions for you all in understanding some of this is, for instance, flaming, sending angry, rude, vulgar messages directed at a person or persons privately to or an online group. Harassment, it could be repeatedly sending a person offensive messages. That doesn't have to necessarily be photos. It can also just be blowing up their phone, blowing up their emails. There is an actual charge for harassment over an electronic device. That's a class 3 felony or class 3 misdemeanor. You have cyber stalking. Harassment that includes threats of harm or is highly intimidating. Denigration, put downs. I know that was a big thing many years ago about putting people down. Somehow that's supposed to make them like you. But as you can see on here, sending or posting harmful, untrue, or cruel statements about a person to other people. You can see that these definitions are not going into specifics, more so just generalized ideas, masquerading, pretending to be someone else, trying to get that person in hot water or make their life difficult for personal enjoyment, right? Seeing someone squirm, outing and trickery. You can see what's on here about you're just really trying to do that, right? You're just trying to embarrass someone. You're trying to make someone's life hard and more difficult. Life is hard enough, especially being a kid, especially being a teenager. You don't need that extra stress, right? You don't need that extra pressure. So that is what that's dealing with. And then exclusion, intentionally trying to exclude someone from something, from an online group. These are all different ways in which someone can be cyberbullied, and then it can diverge from there. For bullying, bullying is the act of tormenting, threatening, harassing, humiliating, or otherwise targeting another individual. Generally, bullying is characterized by 3 criteria. It's aggressive and intentional, specifically the intent part. It's carried out repeatedly and over time. It doesn't have to be a one and done. It usually is not. And it occurs within a relationship characterized by an imbalance of power. You might be a certain way, but you don't know how other people are or think. You don't know what's really their incentive for doing something or why they're doing something, their intent. So just realize oftentimes people are always looking for a way to get leg up on somebody else. Regarding bullying, you can have the direct way, which is happens a lot less frequently. You can read for yourself here. It just means that, right? Face to face, in person. That's kind of how it was more so in my age. Now more so you have the indirect, right? Those anonymous text messages, those anonymous messages over email. And, nowadays it's so easy to get a different email address, right? I know I've had many cases where a high schooler had, 3, 4 different accounts under the same platform. And it was for different reasons, right? This is the one my parents can see. This is the one my friends can see. This is the one where I choose to be a little bit more risque and I can, talk my mind. And you'll find that sometimes juveniles have these multiple platforms or multiple accounts. And so everything's done anonymous now. And that's really where most of that bullying takes place. And you can see on here about the manipulation, obscene gestures, intentional exclusion, or really social isolation. And that's really oftentimes what's the most harming part of the bullying aspect. Regarding bullying, you can see on here and the relevant laws. And as I said earlier, we have laws on harassment, both misdemeanor and felony. We have laws on stalking, both misdemeanor and felony. We have menacing, both have misdemeanor and felony level. And then obviously blackmail, felony level. Depending on your actions, you could be looking at a misdemeanor, you could be looking at a felony. And obviously you start getting in the felony range, that is when you're putting yourself in the worst position possible because of the level of penalties, supervision that would come with a felony adjudication versus a misdemeanor adjudication that the courts obviously look more kindly on. Each of those, as you see, each of those carry their own penalties and the type of penalties. So just kind of keep that in mind. There are different levels. Just a reminder for your kids, once again, don't share your passwords, please. Even adults, don't share it. Be very private with that information. You wouldn't go around giving someone your social security number, right? Or private, what's the security code to get into my house? You wouldn't share that. Think of it like that. Protect it because since nothing ever gets erased, you've seen postings that impact people's lives when it comes to jobs, how they're viewed by friends and family. So keep it in mind, secure that. Deleting a file does not completely erase it from your computer, not only within the computer itself, because you can get those IT people who can find things, even if it's been erased, but as already talked to you about subpoenas, things living in the cloud, nothing's ever really gone now in today's age. So keep that in mind. And anything you share online can be linked back to you. Remember, your computer, the computer I'm on, has an IP address, right? The internet you're using, it's all logged in. I can find all that. I can get that information. So don't put yourself in that situation, please. Talking about consent. This should go without saying, right? No means no. You have to give consent. Consent is going to make a world of difference. Whether you're talking about sexting, whether you're talking about sex assault, and then even then, if you have consent, then it still may not matter depending on what type of crime and what we're dealing with, people's ages, right? But when consent is most prevalent is dealing with sex, right? Intercourse, sexual touching, especially on intimate parts of your body. that also always has to have consent. We can even boil it down to, I know what's going around right now with schools, and we get the notifications from the schools regarding, butt grab Thursdays, or, flip up your dress Tuesdays, or whatever have you, whatever is the new and going thing with these kids nowadays. Realize something that you may think is fun, all fun and games. And I didn't mean it in a sexual way. I just slapped someone's butt. Well, guess what? That doesn't necessarily matter, right? If we're talking about maybe something else, then there may be a sexual gratification aspect to the crime. But if you touch someone and they didn't give you consent, and you're touching them on an intimate part of their body, whether it's under their clothes or over their clothes, you're probably going to be seeing someone like me in your future. So please get it through your kids' heads. If you're the kid, the high schooler or the juvenile who's here today, get it through your head that just because you may have a certain intention or idea does not sometimes matter to the law, and the exposure you're setting yourself up for regarding these legal ramifications. Okay, always make sure you have someone's consent. If it happens, contact. So realize, sometimes we get even adults, but most times, juveniles who are still learning things about life, they think, oh, it's got to be a certain type of penetration, right? It's got to be sexual intercourse. Well, not always. As you can see on here, you have penetration. It can be done with the mouth, tongue, penis, anus, vagina. You could also be, maybe it doesn't go up to penetration, but maybe intrusion. Everything else that, not those first ones that we talked about. And then touching. It can be as simple as I said, over walking down the hallway and you smack someone's butt. That can be sufficient enough to get you in liability troubles with the law. Okay. These get very complicated because you always get someone who thinks they're going to circumvent the law. And trust me, there are a lot of politicians, a lot of judges, a lot of prosecutors who have spent a lot of time going over this information, looking for loopholes for that exact purpose. So you're probably not telling us something new. Issues you should keep in mind regarding what makes unlawful sexual contact unlawful: lack of consent automatically, a lack of capacity consent, right? And what I mean by that is someone's age. Someone usually it's deemed, depending on what's happening, someone under the age of 18 can't give consent for certain things. I'm not going to enter into a contractual obligation or contract with a 15-year-old because it's presumed they can't enter into that type of contract. So you can imagine you start getting lower. You got a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old. They cannot give consent for someone to grab their butt or to unlawfully commit a lawful sexual contact on them, right? Intoxication. You go to a party, someone's drunk. That's not an invitation to touch them, right? It's not an invitation to have sex with them. Same thing with drug, because now you're talking about someone who may have been drugged against their will. Even worse, because if it wasn't bad enough that they're a victim, now you're finding out just how much of a victim they are. Same thing with disabled, whether it's physically, mentally, what have you. Certain individuals are not deemed to be able to give consent. Obviously, you have prohibited family relationships, incest, nope, and illegal commercial purposes. Obviously, we deal a lot with prostitution and trafficking. Taking it from there, you can imagine unlawful sexual contact is going to be your lower charges. You get to sexual contact, or you get to like sexual assault, it gets even worse. But you can see on here about sexual contact, touching, the intimate parts or each other's intimate parts. You could almost get two individuals who could equally be charged. You also have obviously explanation of intimate parts. I'm sure most of you are all aware of that, so I'm not going to go into that. But imagine your body, all those parts could possibly be used as possible basis for charges.
Juan, I'm going to interrupt and say, because we have 7 minutes, why don't we take some questions and we can wrap up, just to make sure that we get some questions in. I will toss out the first one. If there's a youth
And Mauro, before you jump in, I really want to quickly, Kristen Bailey was able to jump on. I know there's a couple questions that are very DPS specific. Kristen Bailey is, thank you, there you are, is, I'm not sure I'm getting your title correctly, but she is the discrimination prevention and response, and also the Title IV coordinator for DPS. And thank you for being here. And sorry, thank you, Mauro. I know there's a couple that are very DPS specific.
Sure.
Be able to field.
So there is a couple of questions. One regarding sexting. When we had school resource officers, the officer would go through the child's phone and delete those pictures on the child's behalf. We've been told as school employees not to look at the phones. Who removes those pictures now?
So if I may, that's become a bigger issue also, because besides us losing the school resource officers, there's also been a recent change in the law where administration, many of the school officials are now deemed as an agent of the state. And by that, I mean, a lot of times up until this year or this past year, anybody acting on behalf of the school, so teachers, principals and such, were not deemed agents of the state or agents of law enforcement. So whatever their actions were separate from the law. That's changed now. So now many of what's the actions of the school can be deemed or contributed as an agent of law enforcement. So what that means is, most likely, and I don't want to speak for the schools, I'll leave that for them, is my guess is if it's not already been done, it's probably going that way, where the schools are not going to be getting involved in that, simply because there could be some sort of liability, or at least some sort of answering that would need to be done regarding their actions and how it may amount to police involvement. So I'll let the schools answer that. But what I've seen in handling these types of cases is the schools have slowly started backing up from taking that affirmative action of like, you are not to have this, I'm deleting it. That is most likely, if it happened, would probably be parents. Also, depending on the type of charge or if there's an investigation, that phone is probably going to become evidence. It's probably going into lockup or into property with DPD, and no one's going to have the phone. The photos would be on there, and then that'd be a conversation with the parents as to how that's going to be deleted.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly just to say, for any of our employees on the call who are wondering when a specific situation involving students comes up, exactly how we're going to navigate that and who we can rely on internally to do that, happy to kind of address those questions offline, or make sure you're utilizing the resources within DPS, right? I'm here as the Title IX coordinator. We have other folks in the legal department who can help answer these questions. Our safety team is really active and hands-on, so happy to walk folks through that. Just want to point out, right, every case can kind of turn pretty quickly on different facts, right? It really depends. And so we want to be able to give you guidance in the moment as needed. So please reach out.
And there are a number of questions from your from school staff, I think. Do any parents have any questions here? Leah, do you want to pull one out that
Yeah, there's one that I would love to address. And I think actually Megan, who is one of our school health professionals at Thomas Jefferson High School, may be able to take this one. But this question is, does DPS, or specifically, is there a curriculum for students and parents regarding social media? And what age should this be introduced to children and youth?
Hey, Leah. Yeah, so I am a school health professional at Thomas Jefferson High School, 3 days a week. And then I've also been in a couple middle schools. And at the middle school level, I've used this educational platform called Everfi. And there's a really great middle school age appropriate course called Ignition, and it's on digital wellness and safety. And so it's totally age appropriate for middle school. It's kind of, it's interactive. It's almost like a game that they can do online, but it just goes through, safety and privacy, connections and community. It talks about their digital footprint, screen time versus offline time. So it has some good resources in there. It talks about their rights and literacy, and just how we evaluate content online. So that is, again, like I said, geared towards middle school aged. You could probably use it, though it would be 5th grade friendly as well. So if you are a parent of a school, and you could definitely ask your school about that resource, because Everfi is free for teachers and educators to use. So we use it quite a bit at the high school level. So I hope that answers that. Sorry, and I have kids in the background.
Thank you, Megan. And then one thing that I want to bring up as far as what age to introduce students. I mean, we work in prevention, so we always say talk early, talk often. So bringing this up at an early age, obviously age appropriate, and just making it a normalized conversation, as opposed to that like really scary conversation that a lot of parents are scared to have. If you keep it going, it's just normal, and your student knows about it, or your youth knows about it before they're introduced to it later. Okay, So, and then there is another question. Our security doesn't write reports on events at the school. Who determines that police need to be called when our security won't?
If I may.
Yes.
So obviously, and I like to say this for at least for the Denver DA's office, and I've worked with a lot of offices, we're very open. If there are concerns, please, it's always better, in my mind, humble opinion, is it's always better to reach out to whether it be DPD or say a prosecutor's office. If you have questions, ask. And as you heard from Kristen, it is a case-by-case basis, right? I mean, some cases are extremely concerning, other ones maybe not so much. So if there are concerns and the school will answer their part, but as the laws change, as things continue developing, if there are questions, reach out to us. I mean, we're partners in this endeavor, and I can't think of it one DA or one office that would say, I'm too busy to take questions. That's why we have people like the wonderful Miss Morrow and other individuals with our office or other agencies who are always willing to take questions or get you in touch with the right people. But if the school can't or won't do something, then obviously we're always here for you as community partners.
Thank you. And I do want to say that it is 1 o'clock. We can stay on answering questions, but we can also follow up and answer some of these questions in follow-up emails as well. If anyone has to jump off, I do want to thank everyone for being here. The next question that I have is, I am a school nurse at an elementary school. Sometimes when kids play, they have scratches or small wounds on their stomach or waist. I have to clean the wound. Do I need a consent to clean it?
I don't know if somebody from the school wants to address that first. I can tell you from at least as a prosecutor, okay? I always side on the era of caution, just because you can imagine my line of work. I don't tell a nurse how to do the job. I don't tell the school how to do the job. That's the reason we're separate. I always feel it's more practical to always make sure you have your bases covered, right? It's always good to have everything done the right way. For me, there's got to be justification, right? Everything stated by the nurse who was sending me that question sounds all like legitimate reasons. It's always better to get permission or have some sort of standing permission just in case it ever becomes an issue. But I'm assuming the schools have addressed that. And with that in mind, I defer to the schools. But just because of a kid, and I have a small child, as I said, kids say a lot of things, right? Long as the adult, the nurse, can justify or say, this is what I was doing, I can't see a reason. Obviously, fixing a scratch or an injury to the hip or the stomach is very different than someone making an accusation of being touched on a private part or something like that. So everything is case by case, but I always like to side on the era of caution.
Thank you. Kristen, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, quickly, I'm not sure if we were talking about kind of consent by the student or consent by the parent, right? Parents can sort of pre-consent to different services through nursing. Oftentimes via the registration process, we'll go through and kind of check off the nurse can do this versus the nurse can do that. And we also have kind of a supervision structure through the nursing department to, again, kind of troubleshoot things on a case-by-case basis. I would think that typically, and again, we do want to be mindful of specific circumstances, when a kiddo's in the nurse's office kind of seeking that help, right, that there's a conversation at that time, can I look to see, okay, you have a scratch, is it okay if I clean it? All of that actually is a process of obtaining consent. And so, there may be kind of two different things at play, parental consent versus kid consent. But even in a setting like that, it's a great opportunity to kind of start having those types of conversations with kids where they are aware, right, it's your body and I want to be mindful of how I am taking care of you, and practicing those kind of consent related conversations.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is, if there is a youth that's targeting your child and the school is involved, great. There's a safety plan and the school is doing their best to control it, but the other youth keeps getting around it, including calling from another person's phone and leaving cruel voicemails. What would the next step be?
So that is the place where we would get involved. We have something called witness intimidation or victim intimidation, or so the issue becomes that can start getting and divulging to a very actual serious matter. If there is that level of circumventing happening, right? The school is doing what it's supposed to. I mean, the school can only do so much, right? And so the school is doing what they're supposed to. They're following the safety plan, and most likely a lot of these acts are being done outside the school. in my humble opinion, obviously make sure the parents are involved, right? Conversations had between parent and who's being bullied. But I believe, in my humble opinion, that is where we start elevating to the level of having to contact police. These types of matters can escalate very quickly. If someone's willing to take the steps of using other people's phones, using certain apps that block their numbers, or they have number, that to me gives me grave concern that this is going to escalate. If that becomes an issue, like I said, there's a misdemeanor charge. It's called harassment over electronic device. It means the unwanted and repeated contact. That can be sufficient enough. And what's nice about that is, please realize, just because you contact the police department does not mean the kid's going to prison. It does not mean that their life is messed up for the rest of their life. It may not result in charges at all. It may result in at least having a record of what's going on. Because I can't tell you how many times I've heard from parents of victims tell me, this is not the first time it's happened. We just didn't want to cause any issues, so we didn't report it. At a minimum, at least if you report it, now there's a history, right? Because in my mind, a bad decision one time is very different than a person who is repeatedly doing the same thing, even though they know that people are watching, that people are looking for this, and they continue doing it. At least there's a record. Now, I've also realized, if a charge is filed or we do get involved, there's most likely going to be a protection order in place that now has legal ramifications for that individual, that they're not to contact either directly or indirectly or through a third party, because now they could be charged with either witness intimidation or with victim tampering.
Thank you. Another question. What if the police are involved, but they said they were not able to do anything, but also this kid has put their hands on the child in school, for example, hitting them and bullying them?
So the first thing I would say is document. The schools do an amazing job of keeping records as they're supposed to do. So realize that I can get subpoenas. I can get many of those records, so I can see, is this an ongoing behavior, as you're stating? Is the behavior escalating? Because since we're here about prevention, that's what we're talking about, right? Not only prevention of how do we not even get involved in the situation, but also how do we prevent this from getting any worse, and how do we remedy the situation? So with that in mind, document, report it to the school. Don't stay quiet. I'm not talking about, the person looked at me wrong. I'm talking about hands-on words, getting third parties, bad notes, intimidation tactics. And, those could be stares, but, you want to have that type of repetitive. If we get to that point, and the school can't do anything else, report it to the police, because that puts then the police investigators, the detectives, as well as our office and with the prosecutors, that gives us the breadcrumbs, right? That gives us the trail to really investigate as to, is this a one-off and it's just out of the blue and a bad decision? Or is this an individual? Is this a kid who is shown over a period of time and over many warnings and chances that they're not willing to change their behavior? That's really what I'm more concerned with, and really making sure that we stop all the victims falling in their path and getting harmed.
Thank you. And there's one last question. And Mauro, I see that you kind of typed an answer, but I think it's worth addressing out loud as well. Do you have any resources for high school girls that are potentially being trafficked, or adult 18-year-old young women that are being trafficked or are in a manipulative, abusive relationship? And how can we get them connected to support?
You want to start answering, Ms. Morrow, and then I can just chime in shortly.
What I said to this person is that I'm happy to put them in touch. We have a human trafficking unit with the chief, and they also have a collaboration that provides resources for people about trafficking. So I will put someone in touch, but go ahead, Juan, and continue.
I was just going to add that also our victim advocates are amazing. They are also aware of many of these resources. What I do want to say to that person who asked that question is, please, and most of these professionals know this, it is almost more common than not, when someone is put through this and they become a victim of a case like this, they oftentimes internalize and oftentimes will then perpetrate it on others. I bring that up because it's so prevalent in the system that we actually have something called the REST docket for juveniles who commit similar crimes, right? Sexual nature, whether it's posting or actual touching. And what the REST docket is, it's actually a docket for juveniles juvenile offenders, right? So they've committed a crime where we have concerns of human trafficking. That's an actual small docket. The majority of them are females. We have a couple males, but the majority are females that have specific probation officers, have a specific judge, have specific DAs on the case that can have specialized training to specifically hone in and are more observant of these very smaller or minuscule behaviors that lead to bigger things. And we can isolate and focus on these issues of trafficking or being under the thumb of maybe a significant other, or somehow are being manipulated. We actually have a docket for that. That's how prevalent it is. And because of that, we have a lot of resources, not only through Ms. Morrow, but also through our victim advocates and in the juvenile system.
Thank you. And that is our last question. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all for spending the past hour and 10 minutes with us. I am going to put my email in the chat. Please reach out if you have any questions about the substance use prevention program or to learn more about our webinar series. Additionally, we do have a short survey. If you don't mind just helping us as we move forward with this webinar series. And with that, thank you so much. I will send a follow-up email with some resources probably within the next 2 days or so. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you, Morrow and Juan and Kristen, for joining us.
Of course. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.